Today we look at another request for a presidential pardon, this one from the family of Marcus Garvey, a pioneering figure in the Black freedom struggle in the early 20th century who inspired generations of civil rights activists around the world. In the 1920s, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover targeted Garvey for his political activity as a leader of the Pan-African movement. Garvey was convicted in 1923 on a charge of mail fraud and sentenced to 5 years in jail. His charges and conviction effectively ended Garvey's political movement and eventually led to his deportation back to Jamaica. This is Marcus Garvey's son, Dr. Julius Garvey of the Justice for Garvey movement, speaking in August.
The civil rights movement started with Marcus Garvey. That's acknowledged by Brother Malcolm, it's acknowledged by Martin Luther King, and it's acknowledged by anybody who knows history. The president stands on that foundation. So we think that the time is now to exonerate Marcus Garvey by a presidential posthumous pardon. And that's why we're here. Thank you.
And we'll be joined by Julius Garvey in just a second. President Calvin Coolidge commuted Marcus Garvey's sentence in 1927. However, the commutation still left Garvey's conviction in place. So we're going to ask Marcus Garvey's son, Dr. Julius Garvey, about his case. He's a cardiothoracic and vascular surgeon who's leading the Justice for Garvey effort. It's great to have you with us, Dr. Garvey. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell us what you're doing.
Well, basically, we have placed before the president a petition for the posthumous pardon of my father. And it's well documented in terms of the legal aspect of it, because that's the foundation. The moral aspect of it is separate, as is the political aspect. But the legal aspect of it was prepared by a well-known law firm, Aiken Gumpower. And they have spent almost 2 years really working on it and going through the case as it existed. I mean, there are thousands of pages, etc., as well as the appeal, which was also denied. So it's a well-prepared document that shows that there was no evidence. There was a prejudice, a judge. There was perjury. The only evidence was an empty envelope, which was stamped with the black star line on it. No writing, no evidence that it was handled in any way by Marcus Garvey. Nobody knew what was in it because the person who presented the envelope couldn't remember what was inside the envelope. And also, he was a perjured witness in that he was told by the prosecuting attorney to lie about the contents and whether he worked with the UNIA, etc.
There's a black storm coming, see the lightning strike, black people rising.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and for those of you who are new to the show, this show is an African-centered talk show which introduces facts where we find so many people are working on fiction, and we try to bring truth to our historical and truth and historical knowledge to the masses by what we bring here at the Umoja Circle. We correct errors where errors are found, and again, we introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction, like I said. I know that many of you right now are looking at the colors that I'm wearing on my wrist, and red, black, and green, you can see, and then there's this medallion that I'm wearing with a fist on it and the red, black, and green colors. Now, this is a significant, and has a lot to do with about the show that I'm going to be bringing to you now on this edition of the Umoja Circle. It comes from a gentleman, you might see his image here, and we'll get to the book in a minute, but these colors come from this image here. It's called the Red, Black, and Green flag, or the UNIA flag, the Universal Negro Improvement Association flag, that was established by a brother called Marcus Garvey. And this is who and what I want to introduce you. Some of you have heard his name, I know. Black History Month, we talk about Marcus Garvey. But who was Marcus Garvey and why I think he is one of the most underrated leaders of in the last 100 years. In fact, he walked this earth. This is 2022, but 100 years ago, in the 19 teens and the 1920s, he walked this earth. Okay, but before I go on and talk about him, I want you to hear the brother and why he has such a big following, as I will bring forth with the information that I want to talk about. In fact, his birthday is the 17th of August, and that's why I am doing this on Marcus Garvey, because he needs to be known, the great man that many people don't know about. So just listen to this.
Did not suffer and die to give me an education to slight, oppress, or discourage my people. Because whatsoever education I acquired out of their sacrifice of over 300 years, I shall use for the salvation of the 400 million black people of the world. And the day when I forsake my people, may God Almighty say there shall be no more life for you. I unequivocally rejected the racist assumption of much white American Christianity, namely that God had created the black man inferior and that he had intended Negroes to be a servant class, hewers of wood and drawers of water. Well, I predicated my view of man on the doctrine of Imago Dei. All men, regardless of color, are created in the image of God. Now, from this premise followed the equality of all men and the brotherhood of all men. The biblical injunction of Acts 17:26 reminds us that he created of one blood all nations of men that dwell on the face of the earth. I was most interested in brotherhood within his own race, because if Negroes are created in God's image and Negroes are black, then God must, in some sense, be black. If the white man has the idea of a white God, let him worship his God as he desires. We have found a new ideal, because whilst our God has no color, and yet it is human to see everything through one's own spectacles, and since the white people have seen their God through their white spectacles, we have only now started to see our God through our own spectacles. For we believe in the God of Ethiopia, the everlasting God, God of Father, God of Son, God of Holy Ghost, the one God of all ages. That is the God in whom we believe, but we shall worship him through the spectacles of Ethiopia. For 250 years, we have struggled under the burden and rigors of slavery. We were maimed, we were brutalized, we were ravaged in every way. We are men. We have hopes, we have passions, we have feelings, we have desires just like any other race. The cry is raised all over the world of Canada for the Canadians, of America for the Americans, of England for the English, of France for the French, of Germany for the Germans. Do you think it unreasonable that we, the blacks of the world, should raise the cry of Africa for the Africans? The Negro is a man. We represent a new Negro. His back is not yet against the wall. We do not want his back against the wall, because that would be a peculiar and desperate position. We do not want him there. It is because of this that we are asking for fair compromise. Where the Belgians have control of the Belgian Congo, which they cannot use, they have not the resources to develop nor the intelligence. The French have more territory than they can develop. There are certain parts of Africa in which they cannot live at all. So it is for you to come together and give us a United States of Africa. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are not going to be a race without a country. God never intended it, and we are not going to abuse God's confidence in us as men. We are men, human beings, capable of the same acts as any other race, possessing under fair circumstances the same intelligence as any other race. Now Africa's been sleeping, not dead, only sleeping. Today Africa's walking around not only on our feet, but on our brains. You can enslave as was done for 300 years the bodies of men. You can shackle the hands of men. You can shackle the feet of men. You can imprison the bodies of men, but you cannot shackle or imprison the minds of men. Dive down, black men, and dig. Reach up, black men and women, and pull all nature's knowledge to you. Turn ye around and make a conquest of everything north and south, east and west. And then when you have wrought well, you will have merited God's blessing. You will have become God's chosen people, and naturally you will become leaders of the world. And as you bow down to the white man today, so will other races bow down to you and call you a race of masters because of the superiority of your mind and your achievements. Because no race has the last word on culture and on civilization. They do not know what we are capable of. They do not know what we are thinking. They're thinking in terms of dreadnoughts, battleships, aeroplanes, submarines. You know what we're thinking about? That is our own private business. So give us credit for being able to use our minds. And with people becoming conscious of themselves, determined to use their minds, you do not know to what extent they can go. Liberate the minds of men, and ultimately you will liberate the bodies of men. We love the white race, not for social fellowship, but for the common brotherhood of God intended we should live. What satisfaction can anyone get in being happy and see his brother wallowing in filth, dirt, and disease? How can you be happy living in luxury and your brother's living in disease? And then when you try to help the one out of the disease, the subtle culprit talks about disloyalty. Black men of Carthage, black men of Ethiopia, of Timbuktu, of Alexandria gave the light of civilization to this world. Ethiopia shall stretch forth her hands unto God, and princes shall come out of Egypt. Because classes, nations, races have been quite quiet for over 4 centuries. Who was merely born abuse, insult, humiliation, whose forbearance can only be compared to the prophet Job, has likewise lifted his bowed head and raised it up to God's skies and cried out, I am a man, and demand a man's chance and a man's treatment in this world. But I shall teach the black man to see beauty in his own kind and stop bleaching his skin and otherwise looking like what he's not. Back in the days of slavery, race mixture, miscegenation had occurred because the African woman had no protection from the slave master. Therefore, there is no need today for black people to themselves freely continue a practice that smacks so much of slavery. Our critics say that the race problem will be solved through higher education, through better education, and black and white will come together. That day will never happen until Africa is redeemed. Because if those who like W.E.B. Du Bois believe that the race problem will be solved in America through higher education, they will walk between now and eternity and never see the problem solved.
Now I'm back, and I hope you understood and hear words that you hear today, words that you might have heard Malcolm say, words that you might hear in the songs of Bob Marley, words that were written by the great Ghanaian prime minister, who was the first prime minister of Ghana in 1957, who was a Marcus Garvey follower, the philosophy of Marcus Garvey. People don't realize that this man, these words that you just heard, also influenced the parents of Malcolm X and also Malcolm X himself. His words also influenced, let me just read this history. Okay, Marcus Garvey was born in St. Anne's Bay, Jamaica on August 17, 1887. As he grew up, he became acutely aware of the political situation facing black people in Jamaica at first. In 1910, the young Garvey went to Latin America and for the next few years went across the world working and experienced the plights of black people everywhere. Garvey arrived back in Jamaica in July 15, 1914, and that's a significant year. And 5 days after establishing the Universal Negro Improvement Association, an African Community League, Garvey stressed a philosophy termed African fundamentalism, in which he called for the creation of a new Negro spirit. The Negro spirit called for the black man to recognize his roots in Africa. This new Negro spirit sought to use the common experiences of black people to build a strong and healthy nation. He was thinking about nation building long before the Nation of Islam was talking about it in the 30s, who were also the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and his mentor, the founder of the Nation of Islam, also heard about the Garveyites when he was a young man in South Carolina. He wanted us to recognize our roots in Africa. This new Negro spirit sought to use the common experience of black people to build strong and healthy nations. It is within the context of building this nation that Garvey came up with the phrase, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. This is a thought that permeates the last 100 years of black people's being in this world, not only in America, but across the diaspora. We're talking about the Caribbean. We're talking about Europe, England. We're talking about South and Central America. He influenced many people through this UNIA organization that he established, and that influence and also later on got him to the attention of the FBI. But I'm gonna save that for the next show to show what kind of threat he was perceived by the government. You got to understand the context of the time. We're talking about the 19-teens, and the 1920s, and this organization that he established, the UNIA. When I read that little synopsis, I talked about 1914. Yes, he was on one of his many journeys around the diaspora, South America. He was coming in England. He had an epiphany on the ship, the steamship that was bringing him back to Jamaica, because he just realized that everywhere he went on that journey, he saw black people that looked like me and many of you at the bottom of every social economic systems. In fact, in some of his writings in 1919, he talks about these systems, that everything is a system. You have a political system, you have a governmental system, you have a religious system. But where was the system that benefited black people? Where was our system of being? Where were our governance structures? What was our, we have the social system, but the social system was the system established by the dominant white culture. And that system always, whether it was in America or in the colonial world that dominated most of the planet, England and French and the Dutch who controlled Africa, and the blacks who were in Europe and throughout the Caribbean, our diaspora, all those systems did not benefit us. And he was wondering why not. He was on that ship in 1914. And that was the inspiration to start an organization, the UNIA, United Negro Improvement. The I is very important, association. And, so on July 15, he established the UNIA. But again, he just didn't leave it in Jamaica. That's where he established it in 1914. But he also came here with that image of a united African world, okay? He came to the United States in 1916 and founded the UNIA here in America. His first office was in Harlem, and he decided to stay in America. And why Harlem? Because at the time, Harlem was the center of not only black Americans, but a lot of people from the Caribbean, a lot of people from England of African descent was centered in Harlem. It was the black capital, the Pan-African capital. And people don't understand that during the early part of the 1900s or the 20th century, black people always associated themselves towards Africa. They saw themselves as African people. In the religion, you had the African AME Church or the African Zion Church or African banks, whatever. So this was the kind of fertile ground that he used, and his way of, as you can hear in that speech that you listened to earlier, that he motivated people to look at themselves differently, which was different than the way the social structure or the dominant group in the apartheid system that was established after the Civil War, where America, instead of going straight towards the land of the free and the home of the brave, that is words written by the founding generation, but after the Civil War, the same forces that caused the Civil War, who did not like the fact that black people were freed for and wanted them to be in a particular status in the American system, this is what he was up against. You got to understand that during that period of time in the early 20th century, you had a mindset by the dominant group. You had the revival of the Ku Klux Klan. You had the establishment of Stone Mountain in Atlanta. Stone Mountain in Atlanta. You got that where you had these Civil War traitors being etched into the side of a mountain. You had all these Civil War traitors statues being arisen. Again, the new formation of the Ku Klux Klan. That's the environment. This black man had the audacity and the courage to say, no, we are who we are. We come from a great people. We have economic power. He was the first one who came up with those concepts. Not only talked the talk, he walked the walk and went with the UNIA. By the 1920s, brothers and sisters, he had over 6 million followers. Let me repeat that. He founded the UNIA in Jamaica, okay? He came to America in 1916 and established an office in Harlem in 1916. Within 4 years, with him speaking the way you heard him speak, that's why I started out with you hearing his voice, his passion, and his spiritual connection, which resonated with brothers and sisters who were at the bottom of the socioeconomic system that we called America. Okay, America was a little distracted at that time because there was a thing called World War I going on. And again, when the war was over and they focused on especially people like J. Edgar Hoover, who we'll talk more about in the second show, looked at, he said, what's going on here in Harlem? There were over 700 UNIA offices in America alone. Like I said, Malcolm X's parents were Garveyites, okay, in Nebraska. There was UNIA offices in Louisiana, again in New York, 700. But the total across the diaspora, and I'm talking out not only in America, but across the Caribbean, in England, in Africa, you had the UNIA offices. There were over 1,000 of them by the 1920s. That's why J. Edgar Hoover said this person has to go. There was a 1919 memo that was passed through the FBI offices that said that a black agitator in Harlem that we got to get rid of. This was one of the first things that J. Edgar Hoover did when he became the head of the FBI, I think in 1920, early 20s, 1922 or 23. The FBI was founded in 1908. That's what they consider it's his birthday. But let me show you some images of this great man and what he did. We talk about 6 million people across the diaspora, millions in America alone. This is one of the many type of events that were put on. Look at that. I want you, when you look at these these slides, I want you to look at how our brothers and sisters were dressing. This is the Negro improvement. Most of the people, look at that, These were one of the officers, okay? Black people resonated by what Marcus Garvey had to say. Next slide. And if you see the up in the upper left-hand corner of this image right here, what country do you see? Panama. And look how brothers and sisters dress. This is not the image you get today when you talk about black people or you see in the movies of brothers and sisters in the early 1900s or the late 1880s. You always get these things. Look at this. The Negro improved. Pride in self. Those were his words. Pride in self. The reason that you see these uniforms, he was saying to the world, let's keep that image right there for a minute. He was saying to the world, you have a right, England, to wear your bombastic British uniforms and walk around strutting. You here in America have that white America, have your uniforms and images of self with pride. We too can do it. There was a reason. He believed in two concepts, that you must also understand the economics and you also must understand pride in your culture. This was his message, and it resonated with brothers and sisters. You see, they weren't hearing that. What they were seeing and what they were hearing was the social structure of white America that said we didn't accomplish anything. We come from some place called the Dark Africa. But here's a man who showed black people that we had the pride in the midst of the worst time when it comes to, race in America. Let's go on with these images. Look at the pride. Malcolm's father was murdered because he walked with that pride. Next one. Okay? They owned factories. They sold black dolls back then, owned by black people. All these offices encouraged, whether you were in Colombia, Central America, or in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, or Trinidad, or in England, you were encouraged to invest in buildings, in factories, in newspapers. They had all of those things going into the 1920s and 30s, but they had to go. Look at this parade. This is in Harlem, from 125th Street to the 135th Street in Harlem. These people, brothers and sisters, marched. Then they ended up in Madison Square Garden that held 20,000 people, and they filled it up. This is what this brother accomplished from 1916 to the 1920s, early 1920s. But by the end of, but when J. Edgar Hoover became the head of the FBI in 1920, he the first embryonic aspect of what we know as COINTELPRO, and 50 or 60 years later in the 1960s, he started with this organization and that brother. This is who Marcus Garvey was. He should be known in every school boy or girl's consciousness when we say Marcus Garvey. But I'm happy to continue on, and we'll talk about Marcus Garvey again in the next show. But there's a reason why we wear the red, black, and green flag. In the next show, I'll show you some more slides on how he influenced some African countries, especially the flag of Ghana. But until then, peace, Hotep. Talk to you later. Red is for the blood of our people that had to deal with the enslavement. Black is for the unity, the oneness of us as a people. And the green is always remember our African roots. Remember that.